Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On-Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on-demand care for common ailments, such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stlukesonline.org. From Boundary to Bear Lake, Fremont to Payette, Oahe to Oneida, there are interesting people, places, and histories in all of Idaho's counties. And Idaho Matters wants to share it with you with stories from all 44 counties that make up the Gem State. Email your ideas to idahomatters@boisestate.edu or use the Talk to Us feature in our app, available on Apple and Android, and tune in each weekday at noon for Idaho Matters. From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. This is Idaho Matters. It is one of the most heartbreaking crimes in our state's history. And now, New York Times bestselling author Gregg Olsen is telling the story through the eyes of its only survivor. His new book, Out of the Woods, follows the incredible journey of Shasta Groene, who was only 8 years old in 2005 when she endured unthinkable trauma. And remarkably, she lived to tell the tale. Gregg is joining us now to talk about the case, as well as the writing process, and truly the strength behind Shasta's story. Gregg, thanks for joining us today.
I appreciate the opportunity because the story means so much to me, as I know it does to everybody in Idaho, for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, Gregg, I have to tell you, I remember exactly where I was when we first heard about this story, which is crazy to think that we're coming up on 20 years. It is a powerful and it's an emotional story. And I'm curious about how you first came across this case and what compelled you to write about it.
Well, here's the deal on that one. I was writing about the Sunshine Mine fire at that time. I had a book called The Deep Dark that came out a couple years later, but during the time of her rescue and kidnapping, I was driving, back and forth from Seattle to Kellogg, and I saw the billboards, of course. I saw all of that. It all unfolded in front of my eyes. And of course, I felt like everybody else did, that great joy when she was found at that Coeur d'Alene Denny's. I mean, for me, like in forever, I will think about that moment and about, in my own way, being part of it, because even though I didn't live there, I was wrapped up in those folks and those people that were going through so much at the mine. And then to see this thing happen, and it's like, I could never let go of it.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because, as I mentioned, the title of the book is Out of the Woods, but there's a subtitle, A Girl, a Killer, and a Lifelong Struggle to Find the Way Home. How did you land on that, especially that part about the struggle to find the way home? Because even, when you talk about who the book is for, what really struck me is you said, to Shasta's children as well, so that someday they might be able to understand.
There's so much to unpack in Shasta's story, even, before the kidnapping and then all these years after. And that is a struggle. I learned so much about the impact of severe trauma on people. And here's the truth is, we watch all these shows, we read the books, we're riveted. Right now, the Idaho 4 is everything. People want to know everything about it, the documentaries, all of that, the books. And yet, I don't think we ever really get a chance, to revisit what is it like, when the circus leaves town? What is it like when all the outpouring of love and support fades away? Because it does. Well, what I learned is it doesn't go away for the people who are affected by it. And I think I knew that in a way, but I didn't really know what it was like for somebody to be the central figure in something so devastating and to have everybody make a judgment about you or look at you and not know, well, there's a lot more going on there than just what happened to me.
Mm-hmm. You have spoken with Shasta, and I mean, it feels very voyeuristic in some ways, I'll be perfectly honest, to be talking about this, because she has always been, I think, put into the public eye, whether she's wanted to be there or not. And then she has been judged so harshly by certain decisions that she has made. And I sit here and I think, well, what kind of decisions would you have made if you had gone through what she experienced, right? And there seems to not be a lot of grace given to her now that she is an adult. So
Right.
I so without trying to be so as I said so voyeuristic, I do think it's important that we understand what trauma does to someone. So can you talk to us about what that journey has been like to spend the time with Shasta that you've spent with her?
Right. And I want to say something just about what you just said about voyeuristic and you know, it's uncomfortable and it's like we're there and we're seeing it all. And I think that's a part of her history that has made her recovery so difficult, which is what happened to her was so bad, so horrible. None of us could imagine it, and no one wanted to really hear about it. And I do think that when people are able to tell their story, whatever happened, and then it's
Mm-hmm.
our job to listen and not judge and try to understand. We never really know the full impact, but we at least have to hear them out. And for Shasta, it's been 20 years of, okay, my dad didn't want to hear it. You know, what happened to me? I have friends that, you know, enabled me to do things I probably shouldn't have done it at 10 years old. Totally shouldn't have done. All of these people, you know, were trying to find a way to help her. But the one thing that was always missing was, can you hear me? Can you listen?
Mm.
I mean,
So
you
talk to
read,
us. So
read the
talk to us
book.
about that.
Yeah. Did you read the book a little? Because it's so, like you say,
I did.
there is so much, right? There's so much in
There,
there that is very uncomfortable, you know,
oh,
but I want you to know there's
I was going
way
to say
more.
what surprised me. What surprised me, Greg, is the part where her dad wouldn't allow her to watch any of the coverage of the person that did this to her.
Right.
Right. And you
Yeah.
can understand, I think, as a parent, that you think you're doing the right thing. Yet it may have weirdly been cathartic for her if she had been allowed
I
to
think you're right.
watch all of this.
Yeah. I think you're right. Because here's, Steve Groene. He's doing, I believe, the best he could do. You know, he wasn't equipped. He's the only parent she's got, and he
Mm-hmm.
has his own problems, right? His own, you know, addictions and his own, the mistakes he's made in his life. So he can't help this little girl. I mean, he wants to. He did love her, but he didn't know what to do. And, people waving money around or Geraldo or Oprah or something that if you're from small town anywhere, that's, intoxicating and interesting. And you want to kind of do that. You feel special. And I think in that moment, he made a lot of decisions that didn't help her because he was thinking
Mm-hmm.
about himself. And that's the truth.
When you talk about allowing us to just sit and listen and to absorb it and to not make any judgments, what was that like for you in to sit with Shasta? And not, I mean, yes, of course you wrote about it, but to honestly give her space to just be able to talk.
Yeah. Here's the thing about Shasta Groene, and she is a remarkable individual. There's no doubt she was remarkable at age 8 to survive everything she did. What I love so much about sitting with her and talking to her about her story is that she looks at it and she sees the ridiculousness of some of the moments. It's not all horrible. There were
Mm-hmm.
times when, she could look back at things that had happened to her that, we would like shake our head and think that that's something. She really can look at her life and see it in different pieces in different ways than we can, which I love that about her. She's smart and she has humor. She's a funny person. And the message that I always got from her was, you know, hear me out. This is this, and she doesn't say like warning, warning, trigger alert, like, we get now in the media and everything. Oh, she
Mm-hmm.
just said it. She just said it. And she is saying it from a place in her heart and a deep memory of it. And, people say, well, was it really hard for her? And I say, well, it was hard, but the only things that really broke her were talking about Dylan. That was it.
Yeah.
When she talked about her
Yeah.
brother and maybe that she still feels she let him down, that to me is
Mm-hmm.
haunting and heartbreaking. And I hope we all cry along with her on that because that's something that can't really ever be repaired.
How were you able to to meet Shasta, to gain her trust, to be able to sit down and write this book, and in so many ways, in her own words.
Absolutely. I mean, it is her story for sure. I always say it's my book, but it's her story. There's no doubt about
Yeah.
that. She is, you know, getting her was, of course, just like you, every now and then you'd see her name pop up for something usually not good, in the media. You'd see, oh,
Hmm.
kidnapped girl, doing this or doing that, or arrested for this, or her kids were missing or whatever. There's been a lot of things. And, you know, I knew at one point she had been working on a book. So, I was interested, but I figured, well, someone else is going to write the story. When that didn't happen, and I could see that it didn't happen, I wrote her a letter and
Mm.
she responded and she said, you're the one to tell my story. And I will tell you, it is the highest honor of my life to tell her story because I care so much about her. And I care about all of the other people who have gone through those things too, and we don't know their names. I think she speaks for them in many ways.
You've written a lot of true crime stories. What made not just this particular story, but I can hear in your voice how much you care about Shasta. What made this stand out for you from even other stories and other books that you've written?
Right. The thing about Shasta's story is that I have written a lot of other true crime books. There's no doubt about that. Other narrative, nonfiction, disaster stories, all of that kind of thing. Usually, there's not a survivor. We're usually writing about, like in the Idaho 4 case, we're getting
Hmm.
recollections of other people about these 4 kids. And they're saying, how much they love them and, they lit up the room and all of those things we always hear when somebody passes tragically. Shasta really shouldn't have survived everything that happened to her. She shouldn't have made it out of that woods, but she did. And I think for the first time, we're really hearing from the person, the actual victim, who might probably should have been killed, should have been dead from all that was done to her, but she lived. And this makes this book so unique. I will never have another story like this. I will always have to write about people who are telling me about the victim. Never will I hear
Mm.
like she told me and she's telling you in the words in the book.
Greg, I have to tell you, this book is compelling. It is actually, I think, difficult to put down. Um, because what you mentioned before we went into break is that rarely do we hear from survivors, in particular, of something as horrific as this. I am curious about how you balance telling a story like this that's accurate, but it's sensitive, especially when you are working so closely with the survivor and you want to make sure that you tell her story in a way that we finally all can understand it, if that makes sense.
Totally. Here's the thing on that. She's telling me her story and she is very forthcoming. And, there's reams and reams of, notes and detective work and, all the documents from the cases that are, help me pin certain things to make sure everything is really tracking and is accurate. So, but
Hmm.
she's got a great recall and a great way of telling her story. So that part is easy. She's good at that. She knows what happened to her. So the part that is hard to really balance for me as a writer was there were some things I just did not want to ask about, and I didn't
Mm.
because I don't need to know. You don't need to know. No one needs to know. There's a lot there, as you say. It's a tough read, and it's a hopefully a compelling read, and people will stick with it because it's content that is very disturbing. However,
Hmm.
I don't know everything that happened to her, and I don't want to know. I wanted to know what she needed to tell me.
Mm. What do you think was the most important thing that she told you?
Oh, there's so much there, but I'll tell you the one thing when I think about Shasta, I think about her idea of how she's so generous. We all look at her and we think nothing could be worse than what happened to her in that moment
Hmm.
in the woods. And then later, when you read the book, other things that happened. But she always said to me, she says, my trauma is not any worse than anyone else's that's going around there dealing with stuff. We all are. She said, we're all trying to find maybe our way home, as the book would say, or to get back to being, the mom or the sister or the whatever we are in life. That what happened to me, yeah, it was a lot. But we're not, handing out prizes for who's suffered the most. We're all trying to get better. And she feels we can.
What also stuck with me in the book is what you called the lifelong struggle, right? And I think that we've all seen that because as we talked about earlier, she's been put in the headlines, right? I mean, if she makes a misstep, she's in the headlines, which is highly unfair. But she's put out there. So I think that so many people know little bits and pieces. But how did you write about that in a way that readers will understand that? I mean, yes, she says my trauma is no worse than anyone else's, but it is trauma. She was 8 years old.
Right.
And there, and the idea, it seems, was, well, let's just help her try to forget about it instead of let's help her be able to talk about it.
Right. Like the psychologist, when she went in at age 12 and 13, and she's in that
Mm-hmm.
Utah, whatever you
Yeah.
want to call it, concentration camp or whatever you want to call it. She's in
Right.
Utah, and and they're saying, you got to make new memories. You got to like rewrite your past, and make something positive about what happened at
About what
Walla.
happened.
Yeah, so we'll go have a picnic. Get your dad and your brother and pack some ham sandwiches and go out there and have a picnic where the worst thing that ever could happen happened, and let's rewrite that and make it a happy memory for you and your dad and your brother. And she went along with it. She took a lot of bad advice about how you get better, how you progress in a way that satisfies those around you that are trying to help.
Mm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think about like a lot of the people that were helping her. One of them, one of the women that helped her very early on, had a great line, and she said, I thought I could love all of this out of her, that
Mm.
love could fix it all. And that's not going to work. It's so complicated. It's so much a part of who she is, what happened to her, that we jump for therapy, or I always say like a Dr. Phil or somebody will get on there and say, this is how you move past it. But it is not simple. And trauma is a lifelong fight to the finish for sure.
Well, I think that within our culture, we want to put a bow on everything, right? It's like we don't want to talk about something that is traumatic. I mean, and I think what you said in regards to she took advice to make other people feel comfortable, right? Where
Yes.
maybe what should have happened is everybody else should have just been uncomfortable. I mean, we're talking about a child, right? And
Right.
I think with trauma, it seems that a lot of times it's, well, how can we make everyone else feel comfortable? We don't want anyone else to feel uncomfortable. Were you able to talk a little bit about that with Shasta and how she views that now as an adult?
Right now, I think about what you were just saying, and Shasta, as a little girl, was smart, and she was a pleaser. She knew
Mm,
what to say because she had lots of problems, before the family's murder. That, her
right.
mom was in trouble, social services
Mm-hmm.
would come out, they had no running water. So she knew, how to cover stuff up and how to look the other way. And I think that was part of how she survived. But as far as like, finding help and talking about it, I think she knows now that maybe she could have, approached it in another way or found maybe a different solution by a different adult, because that was what she needed. Her dad could not do it. And yet that's who she had.
Mm-hmm. Do you think stories like this can hopefully change the way that we think about victims, but also in the way that we think about long-term trauma, that this is, as you say, a lifetime struggle?
Yeah. And here's the point on that. And you're so right. This is like the case study of what, severe trauma looks like. And other people who've experienced that have written to me say, yeah, that's me, or that's my sister. I understand, through Shasta's very different story, the parallels in their own lives. And what I think about trauma now is it is something that you can live with. It's going to take a lot of work. And when I would write about people before, I would think that, the idea of, oh, well, they moved on, but you really don't ever
Mm.
move on. It rewrites your whole life to the end.
I have about 1 minute left with you. What do you want people to take away from this book and to understand about Shasta?
Uh, for one, her struggles are daily. She's got 5 children. Her husband's in
Mm-hmm.
prison. She, you know, she's doing the best that she can. She was given the worst lot in life, I think, though she would say others had it worse. Um, and I think that we need to give her that grace, that kindness, that we still all have that capacity for that. And let's not judge anybody who, for some reason in your mind, why don't they get over it? Because they just
Mm-hmm.
can't. That's it. They can't. And while you can't love them and fix them through that, I believe that listening and giving them that ability to talk to you, even if you've heard it before, I think it is helpful. And I think that's what we need to do when we're confronted with the opportunity to give that kind of kindness. We really need that.
Well, I have to tell you, Greg, as I said, not only was the book compelling, it is difficult to read, but it is an important read, I think. So thank you for taking time to talk with us today and for telling Shasta's story in her words. That is so important. So thank you for your time.
I appreciate everything. Thank you.
We've been talking with New York Times bestselling author Gregg Olsen about his new book, Out of the Woods. It is available now. I'm Gemma Gaudette, and this is Idaho Matters.